Okay, so sound, symbolism and sonnets. This is the title and of today, and you can see that I put the S letters in italics and underlined them because there was quite a few S sounds in this line, in this title, and I thought this was a good example to start with of the very thing that is being described in the first part, sound symbolism, because the S has a particular feeling to it and creates a particular effect. And this has a name. We call it, in English, we call it sibilance. And this is a repetition. So we already have talked about repetition. Repetition of an S sound is sibilance. And this can create effects which have a sound like, I mean, what does this sound like? It can be hissing, it can be a rushing water, it can be a snake, or anything which is kind of a sound. So this is an example of sound symbolism, sibilance. So S is not the only letter sound that has this potential within it. Every sound that we can make in theory is captured by the International Phonetic Alphabet, which I don't know if you're aware of this, but I'll just show you quickly. This is an excellent resource here, the Ipa Chart with sounds. So for the vowels and the consonant sounds, that you have the symbol, which is across languages of each sound, and with the vowels and the consonants, this is arranged spatially. So with this, for example, with the vowels, a close front vowel is at the front of the mouth and high up, and it sounds, this is like E. 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 So you can hear it. And then the other end of the table, a kind of back open vowel, or. So you can play around. This one in the middle is the schwa. This is very common in the English language. And this is a sound which I just made, and it's the sound I make involuntarily when I'm thinking about what to say. And it's not just an interjection like that, it's also used in lots of words. It's almost like a colorless vowel, it's right in the middle. And so when I say a word like station, that second vowel sound, station, even when I say like the word her, because of my accent, I just say her. Anyway, without going into too much detail, you also have consonant sounds, both voiced and voiceless. And so with a th sound is an example, dental fricative.
Tha, a tha.
Th, and then the.
Tha, a tha.
So if you've ever studied phonetics, this might be familiar to you, but it gives us a good picture of the spatial arrangement of the sounds. So that's why I wanted to show that to you. Okay. So what we'll talk about then crosses over with some aspects of linguistics in terms of the mapping of sound and meaning. What I've put here is we've started then with onomatopoeia, which you probably are aware of because this is the simplest type of sound symbolism, because it's the word used to describe a sound which sounds like the sound it describes. So there's a direct connection between the sound and the meaning. And the easiest way, this is often described to children because it's quite simple, and there are commonalities across languages for describing animal sounds. So So a buzzing of a bee, and then there are lists here: meow, moo, neigh, tweet, oink, bar. And the different, there are interesting discussions you can have between the sound, the words which different languages might use for the barking of a dog, for example. But it's not just animal noises. There are also splash, thump, roar, rustle. And then at the bottom, this description, a group of words related to different sounds of wind, such as swish, swoosh, whiff, whoosh, whiz, and whisper. So there's lots of the W letter there. And so we begin to think, why are there these groups of linked words? There's a kind of direct motivated link between the way the word sounds and what the sound is denoting. And this is interesting in linguistic study because generally, since the early 20th century, the very simplified argument is that there's no direct relation between the sound of a word and its meaning. It's a completely arbitrary relation. But these kinds of examples, and then by a wider extent, poetic language in general, often is working against that rule, or showing or demonstrating sounds and words which go against that rule, because they want, in poetry, we want to create sometimes a link between sound and the meaning, not necessarily as direct as an onomatopoeic word. We can see that there are more subtle connections, which are not a direct link. So it's not just a sound that describes the sound that it's denoting. There are, slightly more meandering links, which I'll show you in a minute. But here are some examples from poetry of literature. So the onomatopoeia in these examples are giving rhythm. So from Tennyson's poem, Come Down, Old Maid, the moan of doves in immemorial elms and murmuring of innumerable bees. So you can hear the M sound the M sound is repeated to create a certain rhythm to these lines. And then you hear in The Tempest, you hear the sound of the dogs, and then the sound of a cock crowing. Hark, hark, bow, wow, the watchdogs bark, bow, wow, hark, hark, I hear. The strain of strutting chanticleer cry, cock-a-diddle-doo. So, and it's often this is sounding childlike, and there are so many connections to a childlike learning or appreciation of language in these poetic elements, because they facilitate learning and understanding and memory because of the repetition element, like we've discussed before, with rhyme as well. Then from Hemingway, For Whom the Bell Tolls, he saw nothing and heard nothing, but he could feel his heart pounding, and then he heard the clack on stone and the leaping, dropping clicks of a small rock falling. So clack and click, these are quite onomatopoeic. I'll go on and just read this one here. It went zip when it moved, and bop when it stopped, and whir when it stood still. I never knew just what it was, and I guess I never will. So zip, bop, and whir. And then in the fifth example, ding dong, bells chiming. So you get the idea of this then. I will move on and give you some more examples. We have some more. I mentioned sibilance at the beginning, and I saw in the chat someone mentioned this, she sells seashells on the seashore. Yes, this is an example of that, because it's the sh is another kind of sibilance, and it's creating the sound of the sea. Absolutely. Yeah. So alliteration is a more blanket term for the repetition of the same sound, usually a consonant at the beginning of words or the beginning of syllables, which are close together. So that sibilance is a kind of alliteration. And we can see here with F, we have from this Eliot's Book of Practical Cats, but my grandest creation, as history will tell, was fire fraw fiddle, the fiend of the fell. So you can hear the repetition of the F sound. And this is another, I think the Book of Practical Cats was Eliot's book kind of for children. So these are likable for children and memorable, this repetition, alliteration. But it can be done in a way that's not so obvious. It can be done in a way that's subtle as well. And then assonance is the same idea, but with a repetition of a vowel sound, where the consonants might be different, but the vowel is the same. So I'll read this one from Alexander Pope. Rend with tremendous sound your ears asunder with gun, drum, trumpet, blunderbuss, and thunder. So you could hear the sound. I mean, that's how it sounds in my accent. In different accents, it would sound different, depending on how you pronounce that U sound. Gun, drum, trumpet, blunderbuss, and thunder produces that repeated sound of these kinds of, these are all to do with a kind of bombastic, almost a warlike feeling. So now we have some more terms. We've got onomatopoeia, we've got alliteration, sibilance, assonance. And it's not so much that these, that you need to remember exactly what these are, but it's just to know them and to know of them, you can then utilize these in your writing if and when you want to. So more about the repetition. I have picked out these, so these kinds of descriptions are can be grouped together under the term phonesthesia, to do with phone. So that phon or phone morpheme is to do with sound, and aesthesia, aesthesis, feeling. Phonesthesia, I would say, has fallen a little bit out of popularity within linguistics now. And these descriptions I have lifted from linguistics papers, essays written in the mid-20th century, when it was being written about in a scientific way. And now I think it's not so interesting in a kind of scientific attempt to prove something about the nature of language, more as a poetic instrument, writing instrument. So to be aware of these similarities, these linkages of sound and meaning, and then to be able to deploy them in a playful way. This is why I use this focus on this quite linguistic, technical focus. I think it's very useful for writing in a creative way. So I'll just read them for you. You will hear the voiced feature D can be used to convey dullness, duffer, dud. And the feature of being alveolar can be used to soften the plosive effect. D is milder than the bilabial B in you bloody bitch. You can hear the aggression in that. In the fl sound words, the f is continuant and fricative. So fricative means there's turbulence coming through, like that. Being a continuant, it can evoke meanings of continuity and liquidity, as in flow, fluid, flume, and flux. Being fricative, it has audible and palpable friction and allows some buildup of pressure comparable with that of plosives, which is invoked in sarcastic fluke, flounce, and flimsy, and in flourish, flunk, flummox, and flaunt when used forcefully. So you can hear even in these descriptions how it's pretty subjective. I wouldn't use these to prove a rule, a general rule on anything. I think it depends so much on performance at the time and what context this word is being used in. But the kind of impermanence of these words, flourish, flunk, flummox, and flaunt, there's a kind of flippancy, that's another one, to these words, which is very rich for playing around with. Similarly with s, the length feature may be activated for slowness, as it is sometimes slow itself, being unvoiced, so that there's no voice in s compared with z. This is a voiced sound. Being unvoiced may be activated for quietness or gentleness, as in silently. Its high intensity may be activated to express dislike, the hissing effect, like cats do. So you can see that this is one person's kind of quasi-scientific attempt to group these together, but it's quite impressionistic and subjective, I would say. Combination, I'm going on now. Combinations of phones, this means sounds, can be polysemous, according to which phones or transitions between phones are invoked. Gl sometimes occurs with phenomena of light, glitter, glow, glare, but it occurs equally with meanings of excitement, glitz, glamour, glory, ugliness, glop, glug, glob, darkness, gloom or glower, smoothness, glide or glissade, or also glissando. So there's lots of, it seems from this description, there are groups, but there are many groups which are quite disparate, as it says, polysemous. So gl, going on now, gl does not refer to phenomena as light, as Bollinger asserts. This is talking about another linguist. It is polysemous, according to whether g, l, or the glide between them dominates the effect. And in globe, glean, glove, and glyph, gl is normally neutral with no phonic meaning. So you can see how there are so many exceptions, and there are always exceptions to these kind of half rules. It's not always possible to predict how this sound is going to relate to the meaning, but you can see the links and you can see how much potential there is for wordplay, let's say. And then there are some idiophones. So these also they're kind of quite intense, vivid depictions of sensory experience with certain singular forms, idiophones, and there will be different ones in every language. If your native language is other than English, you might think of other examples. So there are some examples in English: helter-skelter, namby-pamby, and hoity-toity. So you can hear the similarity in the rhythm with this kind of repeated two-word kind of parallelism there, meaning something very specific. And it's not, the sound isn't related to the meaning. It's almost like a nonsense word. But a helter-skelter is this kind of slide that goes in a spiral this way, or namby-pamby is meaning someone who's a little bit of a wimp, a wuss. A hoity-toity is someone who is a bit kind of snobbish. And there are many examples here, and I'm interested to hear examples from other languages of these. And this is something we could spend a lot of time talking about, but I'm just bringing them up to show a spectrum of different aspects of sound symbolism that can be mobilized in poetic writing. So so you have a sound of them, we have lickety-split, gobbledygook, we have oodle, ogle, caboodle, hornswoggle, boondoggle, pell-mell, clippity-clop, flim-flam, flip-flop, bazillion, gazillion, kaplunk, switcheroo, pluggeroo, shockaroo. And they create certain feelings. I think you either use them and love them, or you hate them. Each of these. Some of these I really don't like, and I cannot just tell you why. But I think they again are quite subjective. Okay, I will move on. So from another, I'd say 1950s linguistics science paper, this is, I said this word phonesthetics or phonesthesia. This is phonestheme, so this is the unit, phonestheme patterning. So here we have in these little tables, showing the link between the meaning of the word and the meaning of the different morphemes, that's the parts of the word, somehow splaying out. They're linked in a chain, but they're kind of going out. So we have straddle, spraddle, spray, splay, splatter, spatter, patter, batter, bludgeon, truncheon, trounce, pounce. So, and then it shows different variations of how the meaning somehow grows like a tree branch through this kind of minimal distinctions between the sounds. So I show you this not that we need to study it in detail, because the way that words and sounds are studied in linguistics now is quite different. Well, I show you this because I think it's actually, again, rich to be seen as a kind of poetic gesture. The way that when we looked at this text from Craig Dworkin, do you remember, quite near the beginning of the course, we looked at his text on lexicographic poetry, lexicographic poetics, where he would use these kind of dictionary type lists, these kind of very dry seeming linguistic categories, and then present them as poems, because there's something about the radical openness of the list of grammatical forms, for example, or word classes or word cases that makes it open for interpretation, so polysemous, with such multiplicity of potential meanings, that it is a poetic gesture, I would say, quite an interesting contemporary poetic gesture. Maybe this is similar here. Could we create tables of words with different connections and sound and meaning now in the way of this? So these are some examples. Here's another one, which is between related to visual and non-visual words, which begin with gl, that gl sound. So you can see there's much to be done here, much to play around with. So I think we can have a go with an exercise around using some aspects of this sound symbolism as our first task for today. So here is the first exercise. So next then, sonnets. So what we just talked about with sound symbolism can absolutely also be used in these sonnet forms, often is used as well. So we just talked, actually, just to link it, I don't think I've put this example of this sonnet in, but there's a sonnet by John Donne, Renaissance poet, that starts "batter my heart" with that b sound, which can sound kind of aggressive. And in the sonnet, he uses all these words that are b sounds beginning with b, like blast, break, bend. There are other ones I can't remember now, but this is an example of the sound symbolism in a sonnet. But let's just talk quickly about what goes on in sonnet form. So the form, and we looked a little bit at one or two sonnets, and we will look at some more, and I will play you some recordings of sonnets heard out loud to show how the sound can kind of pull this very rigid structure, kind of pull it like elastic and stretch out certain words and make other ones shorter, and it becomes very much like regular speech. So the form consists of two parts, often called the proposition and the resolution. You remember me saying that it's quite a technical kind of machine, the sonnet. And the volta is what's called the turn, which is what kind of turns the proposition around to the resolution. So it often poses a question or a problem at the beginning, and then the turn turns it round and resolves it or gives it a new perspective. So that's what happens in a sonnet. That's the kind of motivation for a sonnet. And then in terms of the basics that make up a sonnet, it's 14 lines. It's iambic pentameter that we already talked about. So you have the 10 syllables, the 5 beats, da 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 da, the heartbeat. And then you have, there are 2 variants which you could follow. So the one we already looked at, the Shakespearean one. So the rhyme scheme goes A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, G, G. And there are 2 other variants, which are Petrarchan. So Petrarch was another famous sonneteer, let's say. And he is the originator of the sonnet, which is composed a love sonnet. So idolizing some woman that he desires or loves. That's the Petrarchan tradition. And Shakespeare also does that sometimes, but he also somehow subverts it sometimes. So the Petrarchan one, the sections are broken up into an octave, which is made of 8 lines, and a sestet, which is made of 6 lines. Whereas in the Shakespearean one, you have 3 quatrains, so that's 3 sets of 4 lines, and then a couplet, which is 2 lines, which create the final resolution, let's say. So a couplet, a rhyming couplet is always one rhyming with the other, one line rhyming with the other. So let's look at some examples then. Sonnet 29. This is one of Shakespeare's most famous sonnets. It's not a love sonnet, or maybe it is. Let's see. I already showed this one to you a couple of weeks ago. So in very simple terms, if you remember, I said, when I'm having a terrible time, when I'm having an awful day, in all of these different ways, I think of you, and then I feel great. So let's watch a performance of this sonnet. A British actor, Patterson Joseph, doing his version of this sonnet 29.
When in disgrace with and men's eyes.
Sorry, let's start this again.
When in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes, I, all alone, beweep my outcast state, and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself and curse my fate, wishing me like to one more rich in hope, featured like him with friends possessed, desiring this man's art and that man's scope, with what I most enjoy, contented least. Yet in these thoughts, myself almost despising, haply I think on thee. And then my state, like to the lark at break of day arising from sun and earth, sings hymns at heaven's gate. For thy sweet love remembered such wealth brings, that then I scorn to change my state with kings.
So you can hear there, there are several aspects of the sound which contribute to the meaning. And as well as the way that he delivers it is very natural, like regular speech, but it's still in this iambic pentameter. I'll just point out one for you, one aspect of sound symbolism, which comes through the performance of it, when he says, like to the lark at break of day arising. He says break, and it's as though the pressure of the b sound is building, and then he says break, and this, I think, performs two things simultaneously. It performs the feeling of the beginning of the day, a kind of excitement, and also a kind of so there's a kind of build-up of pressure and then a release. So there's excitement, and it also feels very much like the beginning of the day and not the end of the day, because of the feeling of excitement. So there are other aspects of sound symbolism that we can draw on, but that's just to give you one sonnet example. I think we have another one here, a more recent one. So the wind hover, not well, it's still 19th century, end of 19th century, I think. Jared Manley Hopkins. So I will play you, this is different. So it's not a Shakespearean one as such, it's more like a Petrarchan one, but it's about a wind hover, it's about a bird of prey. A falcon. And so already there's a subversion, because it's not some idealized woman, it's a bird, but it's still a kind of a love poem in a different way. So it's also got some religious overtones, which we don't need to talk about. But what we can listen out for, I will play this, another recording for you. Listen out for the alliteration. There is loads of it in this sonnet. Okay, that's not the right. Hang on.
The Wind Hover by Jared Manley Hopkins. Read for LibriVox.org by Anne Fletcher, 2017. To Christ our Lord. I caught this morning morning's minion, kingdom of daylight's dauphin, dappled dawn-drawn falcon, in his riding of the rolling level, underneath him steady air, and striding high there, how he rung upon the rein of a wimpling wing in his ecstasy. Then off forth on swing, as a skate's heels sweep smooth on a bow bend. The hurl and gliding rebuffed the big wind. My heart in hiding stirred for a bird, the achieve of, the mastery of the thing. Brute beauty and valor and act, O air, pride, plume, here buckle. And the fire that breaks from thee then, a billion times told lovelier, more dangerous, O my chevalier. No wonder of it. Sheer plod makes plough down Sicilian shine, and blue bleak embers, ah, my dear, fall, gall themselves, and gash gold vermilion.
Okay. So you can hear, I don't know if you noticed, but you have kingdom of daylight's dauphin, dapple dawn drawn. And then you have some wimpling wing, and there are so many examples: skate, sweep, smooth, bow bend, blue bleak embers. And then there are rhyming aspects as well, Sicilian, vermilion. So again, hearing it gives an extra element in terms of the kind of rising and falling intonation, which you could say, because this is about a bird, makes you think of the bird in flight, soaring in the air. So there, as well as consonant sounds, there are vowel sounds such as the gliding and hiding and striding and riding. And then when in this last line, fall, gall themselves, the repetition of the or sound is a little bit more as though the bird is going down. So you see these kind of quite simple aspects of sound symbolism working in these sonnets. So this is the format of a sonnet. What I have done is I have put many sonnets on here for you. And so the next task then, don't worry about the previous exercise. You can start a new exercise with this if you want to, or you can continue if you were happy with what you started. But the task is to try and put together a sonnet. So if this feels impossible, all you need to do is take some of, don't worry too much about the rhyme. It's more like a 14, just try and put together 14 lines, and you can use these lines as they are in these different poems, kind of pick one from each or pick one from different ones, and try and put a sonnet together yourself. And you can make your own lines as well if you want to. So what I will do then, so it's easier, this is just to allow you to try and get a feel for the form of a sonnet. And I don't expect, we don't have lots of time now. I'll give you a little bit more time than the last exercise, like 20 minutes or so. If you can't finish it, don't worry. But what I will do is I will post into the chat now a text document that has these sonnets, so you can copy and paste. You don't need to write them. That will be one thing that will help you. You can use any sonnet that you find that you know, or you could write your own lines. So does anyone have questions about that, first of all? I'm just going to stop recording so that we can continue.